Let me bring out Joe and Andrew. Joe Klimavicz. Which way are you guys going to sit? There you go. Well, then I'll do Andrew Jackson. In addition to being a former president of the United States, he now merely serves as the Interior Department's Assistant Secretary of Technology, Information and Business Services. And Joe Klimavicz is the CIO and Director of the High Performance Computing at the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. You may know it as NOAA. And Joe, we'll start with you because it was a year ago, right about now, that you actually announced that NOAA was going to move over, take its email to the cloud.
That's correct. At this event 1 year ago, a slightly different stage, we announced we had just awarded the contract to move our email to Google's cloud, and it was a couple of days, and then in December, 6 months later, we completed the migration of moving all of our email to the cloud. And it was 36 terabytes of mail, 150 million emails, and 25,000 accounts. And it was a very successful transition. We learned a lot in the move, but it was essentially a 5-phase migration. It was a lot of lessons learned.
I want to talk about some lessons learned, but before we do that, I want to ask you about the why, because before you make an award, you have to say, okay, we're doing this for a reason. Why do this in the first place? Other than OMB saying cloud first and all those kinds of things.
No, it wasn't driven by OMB saying cloud first or anything like that. We had 19 legacy email systems scattered throughout the country, and really all of them were past end of life. And so not all 19 different technologies, but small systems that we needed to have the interoperability, the seamless integration of the different mail servers, mail systems, calendar, and we were really getting into mobile devices, and our existing mail systems were not integrated with our mobile devices. So we had tried in the past to consolidate with our own solutions, and it was that was very difficult to do. And I was told that in the past, in the 1990s, we had 80-some email systems, so 19 wasn't too bad. But clearly, that's not the most efficient way to do things. And we looked at the math. We said we could use a cloud solution at a fraction of what it would cost us to build our own email solutions. Had all this capability out there, and I like the idea of getting out of having to actually run the operations, and I think that CIOs ought to be more in terms of making sure services are provided, delivered, but you're really trying to get the best and most efficient service for your customers, and this clearly was the way to go.
So he had 87 systems. How many email systems are you replacing?
Well, I don't know that I can top that, but we currently have about 7. When I joined the department about 3 years ago, we had 14 different systems, one for each of our major bureaus and offices, and we've whittled that away, but our real opportunity to leapfrog into the future is
so
to move
tell me
to
the
cloud.
why. You guys just did your initial award about a month ago.
That's right.
So why?
Well, I mean, I think we're very much in a similar situation. The department has had a history of trying to move toward a unified messaging platform, and it hasn't been very successful. We've had at least 3 attempts that I know of in the last decade, and so we sort of, when I got on board, the secretary asked me to make it a top priority, knowing how important email is to the communication lifeblood of the department, and the real sort of the game changer was that the market had evolved to the point where we could really think about entrusting someone else to sort of run this for us and probably do a much better job at it, unequivocally do a much better job at it. So.
And many people, Interior Department, when you talk about Interior and IT, the first thing that jumps to everybody's mind is, of course, Interior was one of the agencies that had no internet for a long chunk of time, which I can tell you as a reporter trying to deal with them, having to fax in your requests is very fun.
Yeah.
But this seems like a big jump from going to having no internet connection whatsoever to all of a sudden taking your email into the cloud.
Yes, we've had our history with litigation.
Yes.
And it is a game changer for us, and I think in a good way, right? The real sort of shift in mindset has been, there's been a bit of a bunker mentality because of this fear that if you step out of line and you don't account for every risk, you might find yourself taken offline, which is a catastrophic event for an IT community. So we have a lot of our security folks who really had this sort of no risk tolerance mentality, and we've had to try to sort of shift the culture back to thinking about an appropriate level of risk for the expected business outcomes, and I think that's been a very positive development. It's something where we can actually think about, as I said, entrusting someone else to run a core business function for us.
They need to climb Mount Everest, I guess. Joe, talk a little bit about everybody in government has their do more with less tattoos, because that's going to be part of our lives for the foreseeable future. How much of this was driven by just the fact that you need to start cutting back someplace, and this looked like a good place to do it?
Well, we weren't spending too much on our existing email systems. They were all, like I said, past end of life. We couldn't even get software updates for some of the systems. So it wasn't that we were spending so much, but when we looked at all the alternatives, this was clearly the most cost-effective way to move forward. And then because the systems were failing, and that's not a good place to be, if you're a CIO, we wanted to transition pretty quickly to something that was, robust. And I got to say that, Gmail doesn't go down, so that problem went away. There's, a lot of lessons learned on this. I mean, your lifeblood is the network. You need to make sure that your network is robust enough to support all the functionality, capability. We didn't have the capabilities that you get with Gmail. I mean, all the different services. And so one of the things that's very attractive about a cloud solution is we have hundreds and hundreds of facilities across across NOAA or across the country. NOAA's in virtually every city in the United States, and you're trying to connect all those places together. And some of them are on very beautiful remote parts of the country, but bandwidth is fairly limited. And so when you start talking about video and some of the other collaboration tools, you really need to assess your network and do you have the capacity to support those functions.
Andrew, give us a little bit of a sense, as you just made the award a month ago, so I imagine you haven't rolled it out yet.
That's right.
Okay.
We're in a testing phase right now.
So give us a status where you guys actually stand and sort of your timetable for moving forward and those kinds of things.
Sure. So we built in a 2-month testing period, and we've got about 200 users representing the various diverse use cases throughout the department, sort of accessing it from. We're not even in the same place where we have a single network. We've actually got one sort of umbrella network, and then we've got each of our individual bureaus and offices running their own independent network, and that creates a lot of complexity, and it's creating some of the challenges that Joe mentioned. So we're in the process of testing to make sure that we can actually support this solution, this externally provided solution, through all of the layers of firewalls and connectors. And we've had a lot of success, I think, in sort of nailing down some of the issues and making sure that we can actually take advantage of the opportunity. We anticipate completing the testing phase at the end of this month, and our hope is to roll out the entire department between now and Christmas, which really means between now and Thanksgiving.
Right. Joe, you did this very, very quickly, 6 months for
Yes.
a migration to take place, which in government terms is like rocket speed. Too fast, too slow? Give us some of your lessons learned, because you're ahead of other folks.
Well, I think it was about right. We actually moved, I think it was 5 different groups we moved over. Before we moved 23,000 mailboxes. I think it was Sunday night, December 11th, so Monday, December 12th. So you can wait until after Thanksgiving. In fact, maybe that would be a better time. Monday was an ideal time because it gave us the weekend to move everything over, and then we had everybody deployed in the sites to the facilities to make sure that week went very well. So lessons learned, we actually had 500 employees using the commercial Google apps for about a year as a pilot. And we thought that we didn't have to pay attention to these guys. They were already experts, and that would actually be very seamless. in terms of moving them over to Google Apps for Government. And we were really wrong about that one. Because due to security considerations, you know, when you look at Google Apps for Government, there's some other services that are not turned on as part of Google Apps for Government. And that's security consideration and so on. So we still use those, but not integrated into our suite of Google Apps. And so on day one, a lot of these pilot users like, what happened to my service? Why can't I do things the way I used to do it? So I guess the lessons learned for me is if I'm going to do a pilot, I'm going to shut the pilot off before I make the transition. And that may not be popular, but as we heard before, you have to make unpopular decisions sometimes, the right thing. And then get that transition. The other thing is all their information was on the commercial side of Google, and we needed to get into the government side. And that was, I think, a fairly, if anybody's here from Google, you can talk about it, but I think it was a fairly interesting transition we hadn't really thought about from a data migration perspective. The data's already with Google. How do you get it on from one part of Google to another part? We made training optional. I'd make training mandatory. Because everybody, there's a lot of people that are very, very familiar with, Google, Gmail, using it at home. And that's, nobody really had any problems with using the Gmail. But there's a lot of other capabilities, collaboration capabilities, calendaring capabilities that people did not have that much experience with. And I would make training mandatory. We learned a lot from the state of Wyoming. We learned a lot about it from GSA. GSA actually gave us all the training manuals and documents and videos, and we copied a lot of those and put those out. I was putting out messages to all of our employees about every week throughout that 6 months. But when we actually looked at it, the local facilities and site managers were actually putting their own out, telling people what to do and so on. And they were reading those more than they were reading mine. And that's fine. We had one website where we had all the authoritative information, frequently asked questions. And I would encourage, I think it's a best practice, put it out there on a website where everybody can go to, because there's a lot of rumors, as you make these transitions, a lot of unknowns, and so just have an authoritative place.
And have you talked to other folks, GSA, or I'm sure you're going to at some point, to get tap into those lessons learned? Yeah,
we have. We actually have a messaging team that we built internally that represents all of the many diverse factions within our department, and they've got a really strong leader who has really reached out to a number of other organizations to build up kind of a lessons learned and a portfolio of practices that we think will make our transitions smoother.
How important was leadership within NOAA, within Interior, saying this is the direction that we need to go? Because it wasn't that long ago that people were saying, oh my God, we can never do this.
I would say for us it was critical. I mean, it was probably the single biggest success factor that, I like to say one of the reasons why we're as far ahead as we are in terms of our really changing the way we deliver core IT services is that our secretary, when he started first day in office, discovered there was no computer in his office. And when they finally did get one installed for him a few days later, he turned it on and found that it had a very old client browser that was very difficult for him to use. And so he immediately moved it right up to the top of his priority list. In addition to a very ambitious agenda he had on conservation priorities and energy production, he put change IT kind of right at the top of the list. And so in my job interview later that year, he made it very clear to me that my top priority was going to be to focus on how to get us from our sorry state of affairs to 21st century mission delivery system.
Joe, how important is leadership in all
I think
this?
executive sponsorship is absolutely key. I mean, I had great support from the NOAA leadership on this, and if anybody had any questions, I mean, they was like, we're doing this, and Joe's in charge, and we're moving forward. So I think you've got to have that, because there's a lot of things that come up, a lot of questions. Well, maybe we should go slower and stuff. And I don't think you want to go slower. I think 6 months for 25,000 mailboxes was fine. There was actually one case where we had a fairly major email server that just totally crashed and died about a month before we went live. And in one night, we moved everybody's email to the Google Cloud, totally off schedule, unannounced, planned for. And that's how fast you can move everything out of your environment to the cloud. One night, unprepared, unplanned, and those guys would not have had email for 1 month if we hadn't done that. There was no recovering that email server.
They can talk to Interior. They have experience with that.
So you can do it very quickly, but there's a lot of decisions to be made along the way. I mean, we did not turn on all the capabilities for a couple of reasons. Some were by facility location because of the bandwidth. Some were because we did not have governance and policies in place. We did not want to have, I mean, I like to be close to chaos, but not at chaos. And
control chaos.
Control chaos, yes. Because some of these capabilities are so powerful that if you don't have some kind of governance around that, I mean, you could have a proliferation of things coming up that from without any kind of organization, it makes it harder to find the information than would be otherwise.
Casey Coleman, the CIO for GSA, who's going to join us this afternoon, says they actually had to look at their whole email policies and change them to a significant degree in order to deal with some of these issues. Did you?
Absolutely, we found the same thing. We actually went back and looked at all of our policies, rewrote a lot of them, and we're still rewriting them to try to deal with some of the new capabilities. I mean, Google Apps for Government is not just email. In fact, email is the easy part of it. It's all this collaboration capability, sharing. What we found is that what used to take literally months or weeks or months to produce a document now takes minutes or hours. I mean, because you got all these people from around the country that are all working collaboratively on the same document, or they're doing video chats or conferences. The capability is incredibly powerful, docs and sites and so on. But if you don't have governance, it can still be a lot of capability without any kind of organization. And we're still trying to put the organization to it.
Andrew, I know that your Google Apps moving to cloud-based email is really only one part of what's a larger IT transformation. Talk about that some.
Yeah, so it was pretty clear that that messaging was something that a lot of employees touched and felt on a daily basis, and it was kind of a large issue, but it was also really the tip of the iceberg. It was endemic to a larger problem about the way that we've sort of thought about how we deliver services to our employees. And so, as I got on board and the secretary asked me to take a step back and really kind of prescribe, kind of a platform for change, it was clear that we had to sort of tackle a number of issues simultaneously. And so we've outlined a pretty broad strategy for how we believe the department really needs to get away from this sort of mentality of having little balkanized units providing core services, and that there really isn't a strong business case to be made for that level of complexity in our environment. And so we're looking at messaging as almost a cornerstone. It's a really good example of how we see core services being delivered, but we're going to be bringing essentially all of those core infrastructure services into the department to be delivered as a service. And we're taking kind of a page out of Joe's book, and the idea that we don't feel a sense of necessity, or that there's a lot of value in believing that we've got to actually deliver services ourselves. We're looking for really our job in the centralized IT organization, our shared services organization, is to ensure that services are managed and delivered appropriately to employees. And so it's our job to sort of bring online. If we have to build it ourselves, we will. But the thought is, where can we get this need met? How can we articulate for industry what we're trying to accomplish, and to lean heavily then on the technology partners that are willing to work with us on dealing with some of the complexities of it's not the same as a commercial environment working with government, as folks in the room I'm sure are well aware, but it is something where there's a greater appetite, I think, in industry to sort of think through the complexities of what we deal with in the IT environment and government, and to help us meet some of those challenges. And so we have a broad strategy to tackle that. One of the other big sort of low-hanging fruit for us is our hosting. We have depending on which definition you use, we have hundreds of data centers, and so it is our goal that within 2 to 3 years to have at least 30% of what's currently hosted in our environment actually move to the cloud. And that's a huge opportunity, both in terms of performance and reliability, but also, of course, doing more with less.
Yeah. Joe, talk a little bit, and I've been very good and didn't ask about security straight off, but we can't get away without talking about security, because everyone thinks the cloud and thinks, how did you deal with the security concerns?
Well, we actually worked with GSA on assessing Google's security, the certification accreditation, kind of a precursor to FedRAMP. So we actually reviewed the documents, and so we felt pretty comfortable with Google's security posture position. And I'm very much of a realist and a pragmatist that Google has to have the right security controls in place and so on. They have to for the sake of the corporation. So that's not the thing. The question is, what kind of artifacts can we have that we can address from a FISMA perspective and so on. And we felt when we looked at the documentation that we could accept the risk at a moderate FISMA impact level. Our environment is all unclassified, so it fit very well. There's obviously some more security enhancements we'd like to see. We've passed those along to Google, but again, when you go to the cloud, it's a one-size-fits-all. You get the product, and I think that's both a good and a bad. You're not going to get a customized solution. I think a lot of feds want to and we have a lot of cloud initiatives, so we moved a lot of things to the cloud, but natural tendency of can I get this, can I get this, and the response from industry is usually no, you can't, and that's probably the right response because you don't want them tailoring their product for me or for Andrew, that kind of, you don't want those things. But what I would like to see is a lot of cloud providers providing things that I can better address my FISMA and OMB mandates, TIC, continuous monitoring, those kind of things that give me something that I can integrate into my security operations. So that's one thing. The other thing I was thinking about when you were talking about the different pieces, the stakeholders needs to be very broad and all-encompassing. You need to make sure that your attorneys are fully on board with this. If you have bargaining units, we have a lot of bargaining units, you have to go through that. Start that process early because everybody will want to have their say and review your documentation. But you can't have your circle of stakeholders too broad in moving forward with this. Everybody will love it, but they'll still want to have their say, and they'll want to tailor it, but don't let them.
On security, I mean, you at one point had 87 email systems. I have to imagine that Google Apps is better than at least a portion of those 87.
Sure, no, absolutely. That was before I got there, but
right.
But 19, the security controls were not that great. I mean, because they were done piecemeal, kind of homegrown, and so I know we're more secure today than we were. But again, I still have things I've got to produce and show people, prove.
Andrew, because you've had, as we said, lawsuits and a lot of dealings with security. How did you deal with that issue as you were looking to move towards the cloud?
Well, we're somewhat fortunate, I think, in that the market has really evolved over the last several years. And so, for this particular procurement, for example, we were able to sort of lean on some NIST guidance that has recently come out, the ability to sort of articulate that, we're willing to look at a number of options as long as they meet, some of the federal guidelines that have now been published. So, earlier in the process, it was a lot harder. We had to really kind of think through and try to articulate in our own way, kind of what was important to us. But we're benefiting, I think, now the fact that the federal government has in fact taken a very thoughtful approach to articulating what are the sort of security environments that we are able to sort of consider within our needs.
And the other issue that I keep hearing coming up about cloud generally is procurement, and that a lot of procurement people don't really know, okay, we're treating this as a service. This is a very different type of procurement method than what has happened before. How are you dealing with that? How did that work? Any lessons learned there?
Well, in our case, we really went out of our way to draft a technology-neutral performance work statement, and we shared that with industry months in advance, and so we didn't want to guide the answer one way or the other, and you really have to be very careful because it's easy to put in one key functional requirement or performance requirement and exclude a large part of industry. I think to me it's once you make the award, it's actually more of a win-win because you get out of this, well, are we going to be upgrading our servers this year? Can we go another year without modernizing our infrastructure? And here it's a bill. I mean, you pay the bill, and if you don't pay the bill, you don't get the service. And that's really a great place to be from a CIO perspective, because nobody wants to pay for the modernization, keeping the infrastructure going. And if I can just get the infrastructure out there in the cloud and reduce it to a utility bill. I mean, pay your power, your water, your electricity, that kind of stuff.
Great place to be until September 30th comes.
Well, the bills, you'd be surprised, those bills get paid, because those you're moving essentially from CapEx to OpEx, and right. If I can get most of the IT into just a bill, they will get paid.
Andrew, talk a little bit about because you had a couple bumps on the procurement road.
Yeah, I mean, I think for us what was successful was a couple of things. One, as Joe was saying, doing an RFI that really sort of tried to open the doors on articulating what our needs were and asking for advice from industry was very helpful. The other piece I think that was very helpful was developing an integrated project team where we had the lawyers, the procurement folks, the technology folks, and representatives from our bureaus all involved in, I think, a very well-run team that was, at the end of the day, as they would brief me, they were finishing each other's sentences. It was sort of a model of how I think that sort of a process should work. So that it was the ability for the procurement folks to get comfortable with some of these difficult ideas. When they're buying a commoditized service, they don't know whether to think of it as a service or a product or software development, or it doesn't fit into some of the molds that I think the procurement folks have gotten used to over time. Mm-hmm. And so having them work together with folks who can really kind of educate them and also help them work through the process was yielded, I think, really good results for us.
So clearly what comes next is your rollout, but think broader than that. What comes next in terms of your overall cloud development? You mentioned data centers. Do you see this as something that will actually take hold? Is this something that other people should be thinking about?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that it is the direction the industry is going, right? And I find that in government we're often playing catch up with where a lot of the private sector has already kind of jumped to, and I think that it's something to be thinking about. We see, as Joe was saying, it's when you buy a product like this, it's not just the messaging. That's kind of the ticket of entry, but there's a whole suite of capabilities that come with it, and that's what we're looking to really to drive, because our ultimate goal is to make sure that our employees have access to the information that they need wherever they may be. A lot of our folks are in distributed locations, remote locations, work on mobile devices, scientists in the field, and so we want to make sure that they've got the ability to access whatever it is that they need to do wherever they may be, whether they're teleworking or traveling or working in the field. And so we believe that this sort of suite of capabilities really kind of starts to break down some of those organizational boundaries internally, and also really sort of enables folks to be as productive as they need to be in this environment.
Technology is an enabler. That's what we've been talking about for so long.
And this is a great place to start, because we also have been in the news a lot about switching over from BlackBerries to iPhones and iPads, and that this app really enabled us to make that transition. But I think in the area of collaboration, you're right. I mean, when you're in every city, and people's first reaction now is to pull up Google and create a document or create a site or for collaboration. Things get done across organizational boundaries now very, very quickly. People know where to go for that collaboration point. And before, they didn't know. I mean, everybody had a different collaboration tool, their favorite pet tool, and do I have an account, and what's the password, and all that kind of stuff. That goes away. So you've got a common platform for cutting across those organizational boundaries. The other thing is, it's, no matter where I am, if I'm home, in a hotel, it's the same look and feel, same applications. From a business continuity perspective, a lot of my telework stuff has pretty much gone away, because everybody says all I need to do is be able to get to Google and Google Docs and
have a web connection.
Yeah, I just need a web connection,
yeah.
And so hopefully you can always find one of those. But this is a great starting point in terms of building out your IT infrastructure and commodity IT and those services.
But it does feel like this is the first step of something larger. I mean, I've been a couple of, in fact, you and I did a panel a couple weeks ago where we were talking about the future of the desktop, and all of a sudden work feels like it's evolving to a much different, where actually you can see the place where work isn't some place you go, it's something that you do, and the place doesn't really matter, and this starts to feel that way.
Absolutely. It's also with the chat, you can see who's online and everything like that. It's amazing at midnight, you just pick somebody in the organization and start chatting with them, and it's like some of the responses, I didn't know what to do. My CEO was asking me my opinion on some technology, and it's midnight, and should I respond? And but you can actually see everybody who's online, and it breaks down all the stovepipes. It's a great place to start.
Awesome. Joseph Klimavicz, who is the CIO over at NOAA, and Andrew Jackson, who is over at the Department of Interior. Thank you both very much for doing this. Really appreciate it.